The first day of their divorce began with the screech of tires and the shattering of glass. Ethan was hit by a car the moment he stepped out, an accident that wiped his memory clean. Julian stood by the hospital bed, the crisp, sterile air thick with unspoken history. He held up a tablet, the screen's glow illuminating the tension in the room. On it, a grainy video played. In the footage, Julian was pressing an alpha against a wall, his mouth on the man's throat. Chained to a nearby post, another figure screamed hoarsely, his face a mask of anguish as he begged Julian to stop. Julian then produced a pen, ripped the alpha's shirt, and scrawled his name across the man's collarbone. The video ended, freezing on the screaming man's face. Julian turned to the patient in the bed, his voice flat. He explained that this was the nature of their relationship. Ethan nodded slowly, his gaze fixed on the tablet. He pointed a hesitant finger at the chained figure on the pause screen and asked who that was. He then added a question about why someone was watching their private games. A sigh escaped Julian's lips. He explained that the man was Ethan's old flame, and that they were in the process of divorcing. What kind of cosmic joke was this? An alpha who gets into an accident on the day of his divorce, only to wake up and stare at his estranged spouse with the eyes of a stranger. Ethan seemed unconvinced. He tilted his chin up, a flicker of his old arrogance in his eyes, suggesting that if Julian recreated the scene that night, he might just remember. A muscle twitched in Julian's eyelid. The man had to be sick. A knock at the door preceded a doctor, who entered with a cheerful demeanor. He confirmed that reenacting familiar scenarios could indeed be beneficial for a patient's recovery. He also informed them that Ethan was cleared for discharge, advising him to rest. The doctor's smile as he left felt vaguely predatory. Julian must have been insane to agree. That evening, in the dim light of their Manhattan penthouse, the air grew heavy with the scent of sandalwood from Ethan's pheromones. He leaned against the headboard, wearing only a dress shirt, and beckoned Julian closer with a crooked finger, asking if he needed to be taught what to do. The familiar alpha scent was a potent lure, awakening Julian's own pheromones. He leaned in and kissed Ethan, and to his shock, Ethan responded with a natural, practiced ease. It was a response he'd rarely received in their 3 years of marriage. Ethan had only ever been fervent during his ruts, and even then, he had never given Julian a permanent mark. He knew Ethan didn't love him. Ethan pulled back, his eyes glinting. He questioned if he was useless, having resisted marking Julian for so long. He brought his nose to Julian's neck, inhaling deeply. He murmured that Julian's rose-scented pheromones were intoxicating. Fragrant? Julian had spent 3 years believing his scent held no appeal for Ethan, despite their 95% compatibility rating. Ethan's voice was a low growl, urging Julian to tear his clothes. Julian's hands went to the fabric of Ethan's shirt, pulling until the buttons gave way with a satisfying rip. Ethan kissed him again, a reward for his compliance. Julian bit his neck, asking if he remembered anything yet. Ethan's reply was a husky affirmative, suggesting that if Julian spread his legs a little wider, more memories might surface. Seeing where this was headed, Julian's hand fumbled for the suppressant injectors on the nightstand. He uncapped one and swiftly pressed it into Ethan's thigh. The surge of sandalwood in the room receded, and the charged atmosphere cooled. Julian straightened his own clothes, his voice firm. He stated that was as far as they could go, given their impending divorce. Ethan's face was still flushed as he licked his lips, remarking again on how good Julian smelled. Julian cut him off before he could say more, pushing him toward the bathroom. He then retreated to a separate guest room, where multiple cold showers were needed to quell the fire in his veins. 2 weeks passed. Nothing. Ethan's mind remained a frustrating blank. He paced their apartment, his bare feet silent on the polished hardwood floors, asking in disbelief if all they ever did was stage elaborate scenes and film them. Julian confirmed that there was little else. The penthouse bore almost no trace of Ethan's life. Ethan, clad in Julian's silk pajamas, proposed that a permanent mark might be the key, a negotiation tactic he had been trying for days. Julian had rebuffed every attempt. He reminded Ethan that they were divorcing. Feeling a flush of heat, Julian reached for another suppressant. Ethan's brow furrowed. He declared that since he had no memory of wanting a divorce, it didn't count. Julian opened a window, letting the cool city air dilute the sandalwood scent. He laid out the truth of their relationship once more. There were no feelings between them. Julian had secured him through force. 3 years prior, a car accident had killed Ethan's parents and thrown his family's company, Sterling Thorne Enterprises, into chaos. Julian's family had swept in, offering a $50 million buyout in the form of a marriage contract. The deal had separated Ethan from his beloved, Leo, and delivered him into Julian's hands. Ethan seemed genuinely puzzled, asking why, if Julian had gone to such lengths to marry him, he would now want a divorce. Julian's answer was simple. 3 years ago, he was driven by obsession. Now he was driven by his career. A few days later, Julian found a contract on his desk transferring all of Ethan's shares in Sterling Thorne Enterprises to him. Ethan tossed a pen across the polished wood, his posture mimicking a powerful CEO. He told Julian that what was his was now Julian's, a way to support his career in exchange for him staying. Julian had to gently remind him that transferring equity during divorce proceedings was illegal. Besides, he pointed out those assets were already legally his. It had been part of their pre-divorce settlement as compensation. Ethan blinked, his confusion genuine. He couldn't believe he would give away the last of his parents' legacy. Suddenly, he threw his arms around Julian, declaring that Julian would have to support him from now on. The notion was absurd. Even without the company, Ethan's personal wealth far exceeded Julian's. But he was addled, so Julian let it slide. He produced an identical contract from his drawer, clarifying that this was all Ethan had given him. As Ethan stared at the document, his phone rang. It was the investigative team assigned to his car accident. An S-Class Alpha being the victim of a hit-and-run was a serious matter. The investigator on the line was brief. The driver was Leo, and the dashcam footage had been sent to his phone. Julian was stunned by the name. The video was crystal clear. Ethan narrowed his eyes, a flicker of recognition in them. Julian's laugh was brittle. Of course, he'd remember his old flame. Ethan's reaction, however, was unexpected. He pointed at the screen and spat out a single venomous phrase, calling Leo a two-faced snake. Julian's eyebrows shot up. He informed the amnesiac Ethan that he had given that same snake $50 million just a few weeks ago. Ethan was baffled, asking why he would do such a thing. Julian could only shrug, though he privately suspected it was a parting gift. But then, why would Leo try to run Ethan down? The thought that they'd had a falling out brought a sliver of dark satisfaction to Julian. In a sterile interrogation room, they faced Leo through reinforced glass. Julian tried to ask calmly why he'd hit Ethan, but Leo became instantly unhinged. He screamed that it was all Julian's fault, that Julian had stolen everything from him. His emotional state was so volatile that guards had to move him to an isolation cell. He pounded on the glass, his eyes wild as he addressed Ethan, questioning why he was still with Julian when they had planned to be together after the divorce. Leo insisted that Ethan owed him. The accusation hung in the air. Julian's temper flared. He demanded to know what Ethan could possibly owe him. Leo's response was a crazed shout from behind the glass that Julian had cheated. He claimed Julian had been with his own uncle. The words struck Julian like a physical blow. Could that be why Ethan had filed for divorce? Beside him, Ethan instinctively covered his nose, an expression of disgust that Julian remembered from the early days of their forced union. To calm him, Julian released a subtle wave of his own pheromones. Leo's voice was a triumphant shriek. He taunted Julian, shouting that even with amnesia, Ethan would never truly love him. Julian remained outwardly composed, but inside, a storm was raging. Ethan took Julian's wrist, his brow furrowed. He leaned close, his voice a low murmur against Julian's ear as he explained that he didn't like Leo. He called Julian my husband and complained of a headache. Julian patted his shoulder, promising to take him home. Back at the penthouse, Ethan was pale and agitated, constantly rubbing his temples. Julian's pheromones seemed to be the only thing that soothed him. Ethan pressed against his neck, his voice pleading, begging Julian to mark him. The sandalwood scent was overwhelming, thick with a possessiveness Julian had never experienced from him before. It was an intoxicating invitation, and Julian's own rose pheromones bloomed in response, waiting. He tried to resist, to tell Ethan no, but Ethan was faster. His hand closed around Julian's wrist, and his lips bit down on the gland at the back of his neck. Permanent mark. The moment it was sealed, Ethan's pheromones flooded Julian's system. He pressed Julian back, his eyes wild, asking if Julian was sure they hadn't been in love from the start. The sharp chime of the doorbell cut through the haze. The interruption was just enough for Julian to regain his senses and push Ethan away. The persistent ringing forced Ethan to the door. Outside stood a lawyer, who looked surprised to see Ethan in pajamas, his body radiating Julian's scent. The lawyer was there to deliver the official divorce complaint. Inside, Julian examined the documents. He had never questioned Ethan's reasons for the divorce, but now the file laid it all bare. It was filled with photographs, Julian with colleagues at work functions, shots taken from deceptive angles to imply intimacy, pictures of him at bars with friends. Scrawled notes accompanied the photos, poisonous whispers suggesting Julian was just using Ethan, that he had a string of other alphas. Julian remembered Ethan visiting Leo frequently before the divorce filing. It all clicked into place. Ethan thought he was a cheater. The amnesiac Ethan looked from the photos to the lawyer, a serious expression on his face. He asked if the lawyer was the one who had encouraged his husband to divorce him. The lawyer, flustered, tried to correct him, reminding Ethan that he was the plaintiff and had stated he had no feelings for Julian. Ethan snatched the file from Julian's hands and threw it back at the lawyer. He ordered the man to withdraw the suit, offering to pay double his fee. The lawyer, at a loss, looked to Julian, reminding him that he had submitted the evidence personally. He then suggested that Ethan should probably move out. The words were a splash of cold water. Ethan's amnesia didn't change the facts. A deep mark during the divorce cooling-off period would create a legal nightmare. Ethan looked at Julian, his expression wounded, asking if Julian was kicking him out. Julian stated plainly that they were separated and needed to live apart. He stood to leave, but Ethan grabbed his wrist, agreeing to move out as long as Julian stayed. Ethan packed a small bag, his movements slow and aggrieved. Julian closed the door on him without a word, waiting until the silence in the hallway was absolute before opening it again. The apartment felt vast and empty. An unsettling quiet settled over him. Where would Ethan even go? As if on cue, his phone rang. It was Ethan. Julian tried to sound indifferent, but his voice caught when he heard Ethan's ragged breathing on the other end. Ethan gasped that his rut had started. He gave Julian an address, and Julian was out the door in an instant. The presidential suite of the hotel reeked of sandalwood. The moment Julian opened the door, Ethan pulled him inside, his body burning with fever. He whispered that he missed him. The bed was covered in clothes from their apartment. Ethan pinned Julian against the wall, his mouth finding Julian's in a desperate kiss. Then Julian saw it. On the nightstand, an empty vial of a pheromone stimulant. He wasn't in a natural rut. He had induced it. Julian admonished him, saying the drug was for low-grade alphas and could cause pheromone disorders in someone like him. Ethan's confession was a raw whisper against his skin. He had just wanted to see if Julian would come. He was drenched in sweat, his breath hot against Julian's neck. Julian tried to get him to the bed, intending to find a suppressant, but Ethan blocked the door, his eyes dark with need. He murmured Julian's name, and the potent pheromones finally broke through Julian's resolve. He was marked again, held captive for days in a haze of scent and touch, their bodies finally learning a language they had failed to speak for 3 years. When the fog finally lifted, Julian felt like he had been through a war. He woke up covered in marks. He tried to slip away to the shower, but Ethan followed, pulling him under the warm spray. He exposed his own shoulder, offering it to Julian, telling him to bite back. Julian did, sinking his teeth in with a satisfying mix of anger and release. He had to be crazy. If this divorce actually went through, the mark cleansing procedure would be excruciating. But Ethan was radiant, holding Julian close and asking if he could come home now. Julian, too weak to resist, agreed. He would keep him until his memory returned, and then he would sue him for damages. At home, Ethan asked him daily if they could call off the divorce. Each time, Julian would deflect, saying they could talk about it once his memory was back. Ethan would accept this for now before pulling him close to reinforce the mark. He seemed intent on reenacting every fantasy he could imagine. One afternoon, he tried to push Julian against the balcony railing, a wild look in his eye, claiming he had a flash of a memory of them being there before. Julian's face darkened. Of all the things to remember, it had to be that. Ethan laughed, admitting he was joking. He promised to tell Julian if he had fallen for him at first sight, once he truly remembered everything. Julian scoffed at the idea, knowing full well the cold man Ethan used to be. The old Ethan was a ghost, replaced by this clingy, ever-present man. Julian finally asked why he wasn't taking care of his company. Sterling Thorne was a massive enterprise. Ethan used to be gone on business for half the year. Now he acted as if the company had vanished. Ethan's reply was simple. No one was looking for him, so he didn't have to work. He insisted Julian was more important. As Julian prepared to leave for his own office, Ethan clung to him, complaining of a headache, an old trick that no longer worked. Defeated, he drove Julian to work. In front of the building, he pulled him into a kiss, biting down on his mark. Julian pushed him away, admonishing him for sounding like a kept man offering to support him. Ethan just grinned, leaning back in the driver's seat and calling out that he would pick him up after work. For the first time, Julian thought it might be nice to have an alpha. But Ethan never came. After waiting for 2 hours in the biting wind, Julian's phone rang. He saw Ethan's name and was about to unleash his frustration when a calm, unfamiliar voice interrupted him. It was a doctor. His husband had collapsed. He was back at the hospital. Julian rushed to the ward. Ethan was sitting up in bed, staring out the window. When he turned, his eyes were clear, focused, and utterly devoid of the fond confusion Julian had grown used to. His heartbeat stuttered. Ethan spoke, his voice cool and distant. He had recovered his memory. The question fell from Julian's lips before he could stop it. Were they still getting divorced? Ethan's gaze remained fixed on the city skyline. He gestured to a set of papers on the bedside table. The divorce compensation document. He told Julian to sign it, stating it was all he could give him. Julian understood. He signed his name. He still felt the need to say it to clarify that he had never cheated. Ethan acknowledged this with a quiet nod, but added that their marriage was, in the end, something Julian had forced upon him. That was all that needed to be said. Julian promised to have the mark washed and told Ethan he could pick up his things whenever he was ready. He left before he could do something he'd regret. He had been a fool to think anything had changed. He scheduled the gland cleansing procedure for the following week, a process that required the alpha's signature for consent. But Ethan had vanished. He didn't answer his phone. His office said he hadn't been seen. Julian was furious. To be used and then discarded after everything. He still had the videos. He opened the encrypted file on his laptop and found 2 new videos he hadn't recorded. The file was titled, "A Secret I Don't Want to Tell." He clicked play. It was Ethan, sitting at his desk, recorded the day before he'd filed for divorce. He was rehearsing. "Julian, I'm giving you a chance. Withdraw the application and I'll forgive you." He shook his head, starting over. "Julian, Leo isn't my old flame. His parents died saving mine. I owe him. Can't you understand that?" He paused, frustrated. "Forget it. You forced me into this, why should I explain?" The video continued, his bravado crumbling. "But you said you'd never let me go, that you'd lock me up for life." At the end, he was blushing, whispering to the camera, asking if they could please not get divorced. He mumbled something about not being the kind of person who abandons an omega. Julian stared at the screen and cursed him for being an idiot. So many excuses, when all he had to do was speak the truth. He tried calling again, but the line was dead. A deep unease settled in him. This wasn't like Ethan. A call from a friend broke the silence. His friend asked if he'd seen the news. His ex-husband had been disowned. Julian scrambled to turn on the television. The headlines were brutal. Thorne family patriarchs in embezzlement scandal. Ethan's parents were implicated in massive corporate fraud. A problem with their will meant that Ethan's uncle had successfully seized every asset they had left him. Everything had been transferred while Ethan had amnesia. That's why his company had been silent. He had nothing left. Julian thought of the shares Ethan had tried to give him, his words echoing in his mind. "This is my last asset." He had known. He had known he was about to lose everything. And with his parents gone, there was no one left to protect him. He drove to the old Thorne family estate as a cold rain began to fall. In the distance, he saw him, a lone figure sitting on the curb outside the massive iron gates. He was holding 2 simple gray urns, his suit soaked, his expression lost. Julian walked up to him, holding an umbrella over his head to shield him from the downpour. He asked why, if Ethan had nowhere else to go, he didn't know to come home. When Ethan looked up, Julian saw a fresh bruise on his jaw. His eyes were red-rimmed, like an abandoned dog. Julian's voice softened as he spoke. He told him that his alpha had been wronged, and of course he had to come. He gently wiped the rain from Ethan's face. Ethan seemed surprised to see him. He explained dejectedly that his parents were corrupt, and that giving away all his money hadn't been enough to fix it. He looked up at Julian, his expression grim. He said it was for the best. They were divorced so he wouldn't drag Julian down with him. At that moment, Julian finally understood. The divorce was never about betrayal. It was about protection. He reminded Ethan that the divorce wasn't final, that the mark was still there. He told him it was time to go home. He pulled Ethan to his feet and bundled him into the car, a mirror of how 3 years ago he had essentially kidnapped him. In the quiet of the parked car, after Ethan had slept for a while, Julian asked why he hadn't told him. He could have helped. Ethan shook his head, explaining that the investigation had confirmed his parents' guilt, and he had to accept the consequences. His gaze was heavy with sadness. Julian smoothed the frown from his brow and asked if the divorce was truly just a way to protect him. Ethan nodded. He said that divorced, Julian would still be the distinguished head of his family, free to find another alpha. Julian then asked the question that had plagued him for 3 years. Why had he been so cold? Why had he never come home? Ethan's answer was a low, aggrieved mumble. He had come home. Every week. He showed Julian his phone. The photo gallery was filled with pictures of Julian, sleeping. Hundreds of them, one for nearly every week of their marriage. Julian stared, dumbfounded. He had been so angry that Ethan never visited him at his company, never accepted his calls. Ethan's justification was just as childish. Julian had too many alpha colleagues. He admitted he hadn't marked Julian out of pure, petty spite. He couldn't be the only one who was miserable. Julian stared at the man he thought he knew. This childish, jealous, secretly devoted man. He leaned in, deliberately exposing the faint mark on his neck. He reminded Ethan that he had, in fact, marked him during his amnesia. Ethan's ears turned a deep red. Julian raised an eyebrow, asking if he wanted him to wash it off. Ethan's answer was a firm, quiet no. Julian smiled, ruffling his hair. He declared that it would stay, and that he would have to lock Ethan up to be sure this time. Not long after, people from the Thorne family's collapsed business started harassing Julian's company. I sat at the head of the conference table and listened to their demands. One of the men sneered that Julian had overpaid for Ethan. Without a word, Julian wrote a check for $70 million, roughly the amount he calculated they were owed. But they weren't satisfied. They wanted Ethan's 50% share in the GT Consortium, the company he had given to Julian. Julian's voice was ice. He told them those shares were his, and he didn't like people touching his things. They took the money and left, but Julian made sure they were intercepted and taught a lesson on their way out. No one punched his alpha and got away with it. Ethan announced he was going to rebuild. He borrowed $40 million from Julian as startup capital. Julian joked that at this point, he was worth well over $100 million, more expensive than any boy toy. The day after receiving the money, Ethan disappeared on a business trip to inspect markets overseas. If it weren't for the daily phone calls, Julian would have thought he'd run off with the cash. 6 months later, the doorbell rang. Julian rushed to answer it, expecting to see Ethan. Instead, it was a government courier. His smile froze as he read the document. Certificate of divorce. The 6-month cooling-off period was over. He had forgotten. He took a photo and sent it to Ethan with a simple message, pointing out that he had never withdrawn the lawsuit. Ethan's call came a moment later, full of apologies. He had forgotten. Julian's laugh was hollow. He told his ex-husband to remember the $100 million he owed, and to move his things out when he got back. That night, a familiar sandalwood scent drifted into his dreams. The heat, the longing, it was all back. He murmured Ethan's name into the darkness, and a voice answered him. His eyes snapped open just as a familiar mouth claimed his. Ethan was there, whispering how much he missed him. The next morning, Julian held the divorce certificate up between them. He informed his ex-husband that what had happened was a one-night stand, and then pointed to the fresh mark on his neck, asking if he wanted it washed. Ethan just smiled, pulling him close. He announced that they would go get a new marriage certificate tomorrow. Julian pushed him away, leaning back against the pillows with a calm shake of his head. He refused. After all they'd been through, the authorities would think they were insane. He looked Ethan in the eye, a slow smile spreading across his face. He had chased Ethan before. Now it was only fair. It was Ethan's turn to chase him. And Ethan did. There were love letters, grand financial gestures, and public declarations. After all this time, receiving flowers was still a pleasant surprise. What was less pleasant was discovering that the beautiful bouquet Ethan had sent was wrapped with a generous bunch of cilantro. He would have to have a talk with Ethan about that.